The price of entry into the world of modular synthesis has been trending downwards for a little while now. Moog even recently released the Mavis, a DIY eurorack compatible synth for just $350. That's a stunningly low price for the company. But Cre8Audio seems to think that prices haven't come down fast enough. It has been setting the pace in an incredible race to the bottom, and I don't mean that in a bad way. In May, Cre8Audio announced the East Beast and the West Pest, its first pair of self-contained synths for just $250. They're some of the cheapest analog semi-modular synths that I'm aware of, save for the Korg Vocal Modular, which is sort of a weird dead end on the synth family tree. Now, unsurprisingly, the East Beast and West Pest have a lot in common. The basic chassis are the same. Both have a 20-point patch bay, a 32-step sequencer, an arpeggiator, a 1-octave keyboard, an LFO, a digital multi-mod tool. Even the core oscillator is very similar, with the West Pest having most of the same wave shapes, but a slightly buzzier tone. It's the rest of the sound shaping modules that set the two apart from each other, with the East Beast and West Pest predictably leaning into East and West Coast synth styles respectively. The build quality on both of these is about what you'd expect from something at this price point. There's a lot of plastic, and they don't seem like they're designed for the rigors of tour life. They don't feel cheap or toy-like, they just feel like what they are, which is entry-level synthesizers. The larger knobs here are easier to handle than the tiny ones on a Volca, and the overall package feels a touch more robust than an IK Multimedia Uno. They're also just a lot more fun-looking than those instruments. I know that the almost comic book-esque aesthetic here won't be everyone's cup of tea, but I quite enjoy it. It's playful and a bit silly, and let's not forget, synths should be fun. The keyboard is a welcome addition, perfect for auditioning patches or punching in sequences. But just like the one on the Moog Mavis, I wouldn't want to actually rely on it for performance purposes. The keys are a little wobbly, plus most of them have 2 shift functions for controlling various features. Honestly, the better bet is to use an external controller and just set those keys to permanently be used for the shift functions. Now, this is made easier by the fact that the West Pest and East Beast both have MIDI ins and MIDI to CV converters. That's not unheard of on a budget semi-modular instrument, but it's not to be expected either. One of the more unique shared features is the digital multi-mod tool. Now, this can be an additional LFO, an additional envelope, a random generator, or a MIDI to CV converter. Now, there are some limitations, of course. For instance, you can only map a single MIDI CC to the mod tool, and the envelope is a simple decay envelope with 7 preset rates. You can't dial in anything specific here. It's a similar story with the sequencer and the arpeggiator. I'm glad they're here and they get the job done, but they're pretty basic. The arpeggiator only has 2 modes, as played and random, and while the sequencer can be 32 steps, you basically just add notes on the end until you're happy with it. If you make a mistake, you basically have to scrap the whole thing and start over again. While dialing in basic sounds and patches is pretty straightforward, there are a lot of features hidden behind those shift functions, and navigating them isn't always intuitive. Obviously, I'm not expecting a giant display with detailed graphics on a $250 synth, but the built-in 4-bit display, these 4 LEDs here, feel a bit arcane at times. I've had both for well over a month now, and I still have to refer to the manual to remember that the first 2 LEDs mean that I'm dividing the clock by 2 for the LFO, or that the first, third, and fourth lights mean I've set the swing to 64%. Now, this is obviously not a deal breaker by any means, but if you're the type of person who proudly refuses to read manuals, you might feel a little bit frustrated at times. Let's dig into the individual instruments a little bit now, and start with the one that might be considered the more normal of the two. The East Beast is probably what most people envision when they think about a synthesizer. A big, thick, rich oscillator, a filter to shave off harmonics, and an envelope to control its volume. Now, while the East Beast doesn't really sound like a Moog, it obviously shares a similar lineage. The multi-mode filter and the oscillator are straight from boutique synth makers Pittsburgh Modular, which gives this thing quite a lot of street cred right off the bat. The oscillator has sine, triangle, saw, and square waves. There's pulse width modulation on the square. You can combine multiple waves to create thicker, more unique sounds, and it can even function as a noise source. This oscillator is something that Pittsburgh Modular has been perfecting for about 10 years now, and it does sound absolutely massive. Being a monosynth, you're not really going to get compelling pads out of the East Beast, but it really does shine on bass and lead sounds. It can do big room-shaking low-end, thick, creamy leads, I actually think it might be best on those delicate little key-like sounds. The filter is probably the star of the show, by the way. It's variable state, going from low pass to high pass to band pass, and you can even combine those in interesting ways. One of the most obvious being if you combine a low pass and a high pass, you basically get a notch filter. It does acid bass lines, it does nasally reedy sounds, and there's a big reason why the filter cutoff knob here is about 4 times larger than the size of any other controls on the front panel, and that's because it's probably the single most powerful tool here for shaping your sound. Cre8Audio and Pittsburgh Modular like to brag that this unique filter has no dead spots and that it's really just one large sweet spot, and you know what? They're probably right. I had a real hard time making this filter sound bad, no matter how much you crank the resonance in every mode. Even with the filter mod set to ludicrous levels, it's surprisingly musical. It doesn't self-oscillate, which might be a bummer for some, but it doesn't really bother me that much. Now, the West Pest is a little bit like the East Beast's hippie cousin. It's a little bit strange, it has to do everything just a little bit differently, but it's no less compelling. It has many of the same features and a very similar oscillator, but it trades the variable state filter and ADSR envelope for a low pass gate and adds a wave folder. I'd venture to say that similar to the East Beast, the West Pest is actually probably best suited to plucky lead sounds and bass sounds, but the timbre is completely different. It's more aggressive and sharp, trading in the creamy goodness of its counterpart for the plasticky weirdness more often associated with Buchla synths. Because Because it travels in less familiar territory, it might feel a little bit harder to work into arrangement, but I actually think it's more satisfying as a solo instrument than the East Beast. Both synths have robust randomization features, including the ability to randomly cycle through waveforms and generative sequencing features, but those feel much more at home on the West Pest. Setting the digital multimod tool to random and connecting it to the release mod will alter how long notes ring out. Then using the random pattern generator with morphing will play back a continuously evolving sequence of notes. And then you can set the oscillator to randomly change waveforms with every note, creating something truly unpredictable. The one thing I will say is that the West Pest does need a little external help to really shine, more so than the East Beast. Its rubbery bass sounds are perfectly usable on their own, but once you start getting into the higher frequencies, reverb and delay become a must. Thankfully, the 20-point patch bay makes it incredibly easy to integrate into a larger eurorack or compatible setup, whether these are your gateway drug to that world or just the latest symptom of your incurable gas. I would probably say, though, that the patch bay is where you make the most trade-offs here. While yes, there are 20 patch points, 4 of them are dedicated to Midi functions and 1 of them is audio out, which means you have 15 points for internal patching. Now, the fact that these act as Midi to CV interfaces is extremely useful, and it makes it easier to control other gear that might not be Midi compatible. But it does eat into your options for onboard sound design. It would be great to have access to the LFO rate or the resonance on the patch bay, for example. Cre8Audio crams a lot of versatility into the patch bay through its digital multi-mod tool, but as we discussed, it has its limitations. There's enough power here to get you exploring the basics of patch design right away, but pretty soon you'll probably start wishing for a few more ins and outs. The East Beast and West Pest are undeniably impressive values. At this price point, there's simply nothing like them on the market. They're usable and musical semi-modular synths with unique and compelling features. What's more, they're easy to integrate with other modular gear, and you can even take them out of their cases and mount them into a larger eurorack setup. They're near ideal choices for somebody looking to learn synthesis. But that's different from saying that they're an ideal first synth, full stop. If you're just looking to pull up some great sounding presets and get on with your day, these are not for you. Cre8Audio's instruments demand exploration and experimentation, and if you want to recall a patch, you're going to have to take copious notes. However, if you've ever watched a YouTube video of somebody's massive eurorack rig with unbridled jealousy, these are not a bad place to start your journey. Thanks for watching, and for more of the latest tech news, reviews, and the occasional synth demo or guitar pedal freakout, make sure to stay tuned to Engadget.